Okay, we are going to get started. I'm going to talk for very little so that our guest can give his presentation. My name is Robin. I am the Executive Director of SIMBA, which is the Spokane Independent Metro Business Alliance. You don't need to remember that, that's a mouthful. SIMBA works great. SIMBA is a nonprofit founded in 2018, and our entire purpose is to serve independent local businesses in Eastern Washington and wannabe businesses. So all of you entrepreneurs and dreamers who think you want to join the American dream and start your business. We provide free and low-cost services to businesses all the way west to the Cascades, east to Idaho, north to Canada, and south to Oregon. You can hop on our website and look for business assistance and sign up, and we'll send you to the provider who can provide the best services for you, whether that's marketing, setting up your LLC, applying for grant funding, all kinds of other options and opportunities. Some of our SIMBA staff is in the audience with us. They are also here to provide assistance. The best way to find out what we're doing is to follow us on social media. We are most active on Instagram, but you'll find us lingering on Facebook and LinkedIn as well. We are very happy to welcome our friends from Western Washington, Jawan Harris of King's Dream Business Consulting. They are in Seattle. No bias here to the east side, but they serve businesses all over the state and all over the country. And we are grateful to have Jawan here to talk about the how, when, and where to hire without breaking the bank. So if 2024 is the year you start your team or grow your team, we are going to provide this information. This event is being recorded. We will post the recording on our YouTube in the upcoming weeks and let you know so you can get access if you weren't able to attend today. And we appreciate you being here.
Very nice. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and just jump in. So this is how, when, and where to hire without breaking the bank. So this is going to kind of chronicle my journey in hiring both employees, W-2s, and contractors, 1099s, and then how to do that without, causing a ton of liabilities, or how to do that and create a culture that is conducive for everyone, and then also preserve your cash flow so that you can continue to grow your business with the most important resource there is, which is people. Just a few things about myself. So I'm born and raised in South Seattle, Washington. King's Dream was started in 2019 as a response to Seattle's ballooning gentrification, really just seeing the business owners of color and the business districts, the diverse business districts being upended due to gentrification, and then displaced south, and then also kind of displacing that sense of community that I might have been the last generation to grow up with. So King's Dream was my way of combating that, but also actively doing something. In business consulting, we're a business consulting and management firm, allows us to ask why, not just accept things for what they are, but ask why, and then try to come up with solutions to make things better, especially for marginalized communities. I've spent the last 10 years of my life before King's Dream, completely different world, suit and tie, multi-unit management, did a lot of sales management, a lot of marketing management. So I have experience hiring, promoting, training, developing talent. I've served as a recruiter. So I've also recruited talent. That I've also worked in HR for a large company. So I've been around the gamut of HR. And that is one of our chief services, is helping small business owners with their HR needs, because a lot of small businesses are hiring people that they know, of course, and their family. So there's some nuance to that that we'll cover in the presentation. And King's Dream to date has served over 250 small businesses nationwide, maybe a little bit more than that. After 250, you just kind of stop counting. But that is all small businesses across the country that are all struggling with the same things, which is just growing their business. We haven't had a client yet that is trying to become the next Jeff Bezos. All of our clients are local, good-spirited, want to be involved in their community, but also have a dream and a passion that they can't let down. So they start these businesses, but finding help is so expensive, especially for business consulting. Here's our agenda. We're going to cover understanding your hiring needs. So we're going to start with the why, preparing to hire, so getting things staged so that you can bring in staff, cost-effective hiring strategies. So some of those strategies that I have found to be successful, being a little bit more creative with your budget, mitigating fines. That is keeping L&I and DOL and EOC and all the different government organizations that have oversight over workforce and employee rights on your side, on your team, by just being a good person. And then we'll kind of wrap up with what we learned. Understanding your hiring needs. When it comes to achieving your goals for your business, the answer is often who rather than what. This is one of the first cardinal rules that I learned in starting a business. When I am talking with an entrepreneur that is just getting started, still at the idea phase, seed phase, the first instruction that I give or what I advise is to start with the roles, the critical roles that you'll need to actually make the business work at its minimum viable product. So just bare minimum, who do you need? So you start with those roles, and then start thinking about your team. Because if you go into business, especially a small business, wearing 10 hats with no plan of how you're going to replace yourself successfully, then you will burn out and you'll be one of the many business owners that just maxes out their capacity. So defining the who. So some of those roles and responsibilities for your staff, that's going to differ, of course, depending on your industry and your sector, and then also your profitability and your income. But the questions you should be asking yourself as you're just getting started, if you are just getting started, what roles do you need to deliver your minimum viable product? Which is another way of saying, if I'm opening up a coffee shop, what roles do I need? How many baristas? And how many cafe managers or how many people working on production do I need to actually serve my product? So it's just the bare minimum. And then we've got, of course, the hourly rate for each role. So we're gonna come back to that, kind of touch on how we get to that. If you don't know, another way to go about this is just look up what that role is paying in your area. What can be delegated to a staff member and what can't? So there are tasks that are critical that an owner does, that only an owner can do. But the more tasks that you're able to delegate or offload off of the management, then the more productive you're going to be with your time so that you can focus on the larger picture and the direction of the company. How will you retain personnel files for compliance? This is another piece that we'll touch on later, but knowing that if you've ever worked anywhere, you know that there's a lot of paperwork involved. So where does that paperwork go? How does it get stored? And then what documentation will you need to hire so that you can start bringing people in? When can I afford to hire? So I loaded this presentation with different links so that pretty much anyone could pick this up, regardless of what your business is. Click on these links, go through the steps, and you'll be able to start hiring pretty soon, hopefully within the same day, at least getting started on some of these concepts. So I've attached a helpful sheet from SCORE. There's a SCORE chapter here in Spokane. They're all over, volunteer mentorship. But they have a financial projections template on there where you can go through some of those tabs. Even if you're not good at math, the calculation's already there. We've got some payroll tabs so that you can experiment with what you can pay people based off of what income you're projecting. And that's a step before you even bring people in. So you'll conduct what we call a feasibility study. It's just like a cost benefit analysis, seeing if you can afford it, if it's feasible. And then preparing to hire. So establishing clear boundaries is essential when managing business relationships involving family and friends. So that's a nod to the many small business owners that we at Kingstream have worked with in an HR capacity that more often than, well, pretty much every time, hire within their network when you're just getting started with something and you need to bring in people that you can trust. different people fall on different sides, but it can work, and I've seen it work. You just have to be cognizant and a lot more careful because there's some nuance there in how to maintain those professional relationships. So regardless of who you're hiring or what you're hiring for, you're going to start with the job description. I've got a link on there that takes you to a job description generator. It's free, works really quick. It's AI powered, so it works in minutes. And that'll give you an idea of the skill set that is needed. If you are starting a business, maybe you haven't worked in that business before, then you can use this job description generator to look at the responsibilities so you have an idea of what you should be looking for when you get to the interviewing phase.
Joanne, I'm gonna jump in. We have a couple of questions online relevant to where we are. First, will you share your slides with people who attend so they can get the links?
Yes,
Thank you.
absolutely.
I said yes in advance, so I was gonna have to maybe pay for that. And question about AI, this is a my question. How much editing do you have to do after AI creates your job description?
Yeah, with Workable, not a lot of editing because it's pretty standard. Yeah, it's pretty standard across the board depending on what that job is. So the internet crawls all these job descriptions from years and years and years since the birth of the internet, and then finds all of them, aggregates, puts them all together, and then and that process takes minutes. So it's pretty efficient, but also just Googling and just landing on like a ZipRecruiter or Indeed, also really good places to look at job descriptions. And then I've also got some other links in here that'll kind of walk you through how to put a job description together, but all free and all really easy. Did I answer your question? It's a great question. Here are the steps to hiring. So we'll go through each one of these and kind of speak to them, because if you follow all of these steps, you will be able to hire, anyone at any time successfully, especially if you do it the same way every time. And eventually, if that's the direction you're going in, you can have someone else start doing this for you. So you want to determine the job requirements, as we just spoke about. So what are they going to be doing? You don't have to make it up. And with the job description and the requirements, you do want to stick to what is written as much as you can, just to be fair to your employees, people that are working for you. You're going to create the job posting. So you can do that on channels like Indeed. I want to say it's ZipRecruiter, Monster Buzz. I can't remember what it's called. There's a lot of little job boards out there, but you're going to create the job posting. We'll touch on that in another slide as well, so I can talk about the cost-effective ways to do that. You'll advertise the job opening. Same thing. You can do that for free. You can do that by the book, or you can be a little bit more creative in how you spread the reach of the job, because no one's going to apply if they don't know it exists, unless you're just hiring people you already know. And then you're going to review resumes and applications. So once you've gotten the word out about this job at your company, you want to, of course, collect resumes. Even if it's your family, this could be really good practice for them. Collect their resumes, look through them. Especially if you have notes, you might be doing someone a huge favor as an employer by giving them some feedback on their resumes. You'll cull through all those resumes and find who you feel is the most reliable, because everything else can be trained, but reliable and effective communication is a really good hard skill. After that, when you've selected the people that you want to work with or you want to bring in to your dream, you're going to conduct interviews. So you'll schedule those interviews with the people that you feel are qualified or at least trainable. And those interviews, really, you can make it your own. There are a lot of templates out there as far as interview questions, but it's going to change based off of your company, your sector, your industry. You're going to check references. This is an optional if you want, especially if you already know the people, then you don't have to do this. I've got all the steps in here just so you never lose sight of how it's typically done, but as far as the references as well as the background checks, that's going to change depending on what the job even is, or how comfortable you are with trust, or what assets you have at your company. So if you do check references, and that process is pretty straightforward as well. There's templates on there of how to do like an employee verification. Um, on calls like that, you're just going to reach out to whatever references are provided, if you even ask for them, because you don't have to. Um, then you'll make the job offer. So regardless, this is how you're going to end. Once you've found the talent that you want to bring in, you'll give out the job offer. It's usually, if you've ever gotten one, they're about 1 to 2 pages. It says that you've been offered this role, and it'll have the salary as well as the dates and some other key information. But people need that. You can also use that as an employee if you want to apply for an apartment or apply for a different financing, et cetera. Then they'll take those job offer letters. So that is really important. And then you'll complete the required forms. If you are hiring employees, that's going to be a W-4. And if you're hiring contractors, that's going to be a W-9. You'll have an I-9 for employees as well. That is your eligibility verification. So that's verifying that your citizenship status. And then you'll conduct background checks. This is another optional one. If you find, especially things like, I would say more so trucking or something where you're going to be operating heavy machinery, things like background checks, but otherwise that's something that, especially if you already know the people, you could probably skip. This is the most important piece, which is the onboarding. That's bringing people in and setting things up to be as hospitable and as streamlined as possible when people are starting at your company, regardless of how familiar you are with them. Having a successful onboarding could be the difference between staying for 3 months or staying for 3 years, just in that that is where people get the first taste of your company culture. And you don't have to be super formal with an onboarding. You can just introduce what your vision is for the company, create some materials just to give them an idea of what they're going to be doing, and then know that as an employer, with employees, it is your responsibility to train.
Juwan, as an employer or a potential hiring staff person, do you think it's important to reach out to people who applied, who you didn't choose?
Yes, I think that one, it is good etiquette, but also there is a possibility, and when I worked as a recruiter, this is something we would do. Within the first 3 months of someone taking a new job is when they're the most likely to be dissatisfied or might leave. That first 3 months is really crucial for developing like a connection to the company and the role. So yes, you should still reach out to them. You can reach out to them to say, hey, we'll keep your application on file for 90 days. It's really good etiquette because you just don't know, and there's a reason why it's 90 days, because you don't know what could happen. So it is really good form to reach out, let them know, especially candidates that are qualified that you're interested in, but maybe you didn't have the budget. You can still reach out and let them know. Okay. So HR management softwares, this is going to make your role as temporary hiring manager, if you're just getting started and you're wearing like 12 hats, really easy by getting one of these, or just choosing a HR management software. This is also one of the first things we do with our clients, especially new businesses, small businesses, businesses that have been operating for decades that don't have any way of keeping track of files or progress with their employees, which leaves you liable to audits. So you want an HR management system. So these are all softwares, they're all online. They don't require downloads usually. You can just go to the website and log in. If you've ever been paid through like an ADP, things like that, they have HR management software. So I pulled some of the better ones that I've seen. We've got Gusto and some of the strengths and weaknesses there. Really, all of these are very similar to each other. Bamboo HR, that's definitely a good one. Super user friendly. You want something that's really, that's not going to be a whole new job for you to learn. These softwares are designed to make it easier to keep track of where people are, if they've been onboarded, starting to document maybe coachings or some areas of opportunity, as well as promotion notes. But you want to keep track of all that stuff because you want to keep people in the company as long as possible by following their journey in the company. Zoho People is another one. It's a pretty good one. And then Homebase, which is one of my personal favorites. I think it's a newer one, super user friendly, really well done, intuitive. I've helped a handful of different clients start by using Homebase. You can integrate it with any payroll system that you're using. I think they have payroll too, but you can also integrate it with the payroll system so that you can pay people and keep track of their hours and scheduling and availability, sick time. All those things can be automated so you don't have to remember those things, but those are some of the biggest ways to avoid fines.
How many employees do you think an employer should have before they look at HR software? Because it's often a big expenditure.
Yeah, great question. I would say a lot of these they're designed to be affordable because they're small business friendly. So I would say your first employee, if you have one employee, one W-2, even if it is your kid, you should have an HR management software so you can keep track. Just see it as something that you owe to them, that you're monitoring their progress as they're transitioning through the company. But at most, I would say Optimus probably 5, but you can start with just one. Cost-effective hiring strategies. So here's our first one. Exploring alternative staffing options. So this is where we'll touch on a little. The difference between bringing in freelancers or contractors. These are people that come in usually for shorter terms. They have defined roles and scope. They do very specific tasks. They are not officially a member of your company. They're an outside entity and they have their own responsibilities, their own things they need to keep track of, like their own taxes, etc. There's more nuance to that as far as what you can and can't ask a contractor to do. But when you're just getting started, this is a way to hire people, especially if you know when income is coming in, when you're going to start making revenue. Because with contractors, you can pay them just once a month at a minimum. Of course, you want to be fair, but that gives you some time if you know your sales and your business model to get money into your bank account before you start making your expenses. So that can be really effective. Exploring internship programs and apprenticeships. So there's different organizations, even of the city, of the county, of the state, et cetera, that have internship programs and apprenticeship programs that are already stood up, that are really robust, that are looking for employers to match with their interns so that they can gain that work experience. And a lot of the times, they will be the ones to foot the bill. So they'll pay for the intern or the apprentice to get started. All they're going to ask, rule of thumb, is that the intern or the apprentice is actively learning things. This is why you also want to keep track of kind of your training structure, even if you're just writing it down.
We had a question. We had a question come in on Zoom about the previous slide, and I missed it. On all the HR software, what is the purpose of the software systems? What do they track? Specifically, what do they track that internal records and a CPA won't track for you?
Great question. Availability, so the schedule. You scheduling people, especially scheduling multiple people simultaneously with different available hours, that's where those softwares are really, really helpful. That's not something you want to forget. You want to make sure you have coverage regardless of what you're doing. So that's something that they do that a payroll specialist or a CPA wouldn't do. Networking and local engagement. So this one is a little bit more creative. Doesn't get used that often, but I've actually had to do this to bring in talent when I was a co-manager at Walmart, and we couldn't get anyone to apply, for obvious reasons. So I would go to Bellevue College and set up a table. I would work with the college so that I could recruit people and bring them in. I also did the same thing at the local high school. Those poor kids. But that actually helped me fully staff my department. We have really high turnover, as you would imagine, and me putting myself out there on company time allowed me to bring in people that are really, of course, that want to get paid, but they're excited to come to work. So sometimes if you're not getting the job posting out or advertising it, or maybe that's not your strong suit, maybe you're a little shy, then working on a more relationship level with the local college or the local high school is a really good way. You can partner with local universities, trade schools as well. They've got a lot of talent in there. And then considering offering internships or ask if they already have an internship program. There's career fairs. I've also done a handful of those to bring in people, talk about the company, make it an exciting place to work. And then you can tap into community resources like job fairs. So those happen every now and again. But at those job fairs, you'll see hundreds of people that are stopping at different tables and talking to people that they're interested in working for. That's also a really good way. And some of those people are looking for smaller companies or something that is more intimate, a more family feel. And then, of course, you've got social media and some of the other free channels to get your job posting out.
What do you think about a tool like Handshake, which a lot of the colleges and universities are using for internships and other jobs? It is free-ish.
Free-ish. Never heard of it. Oh, I wish. So it's
We just hired a couple of interns, and most of them required, at least Whitworth, locally here in Spokane, required me to get on Handshake to post the job so other students could see it. I could
yeah.
sort of self-select, but it did open up potential candidate base of 70,000 students out of from
Whoa.
schools in Washington, Oregon, Idaho, and as far as Montana. It was a pretty easy process, but to get to see more details, like you got to see a preview of people, but to see more, you had to have a paid account. We're a nonprofit, so we don't have a paid account.
Got it. Yeah, so free-ish. That sounds like a good one, especially with that exposure. If you can pay to play, there's a maybe now that I'm thinking about it, a couple other softwares where they do a similar thing. They've got a lot of interns that they're trying to match with employers. Some of them exclusively remote, some that are local to you, and they'll send people to you. I've only seen free ones, so Handshake is a paid one, so that's a little different. Boop. Utilize online platforms and job boards. So this is also kind of falls in line with social media, LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter. These things are free, so you can do that. When Kingstream started in 2019, that's where I put all of our jobs was Facebook because I didn't know where else to put them. And I had believed the myth that you can only use Indeed if you pay. So I went to Facebook and paid to advertise the jobs. I did fill all of the jobs, which is really great. And those were my first employees right there off of Facebook. So that's an avenue. You've also got LinkedIn. They're pretty pricey though to advertise anything. But LinkedIn is where you're going to get really qualified candidates. So that depends on the role that you're hiring for. And then online job boards, so things like Glassdoor, ZipRecruiter, like I've mentioned, and of course Indeed. And this isn't going to be super comprehensive because this is a pretty big topic and it stays in the news. Just the differences between employees and contractors, what makes someone an employee, what makes someone a contractor, and keeping those lines very clear. Subtle nuances like you train employees, but you can't train a contractor because contractors they're not a member of your company. You can certify them. So there's different ways to get around it, but you don't train a contractor, but you can train an employee, promote an employee, et cetera. So the benefits of hiring employees are that it's a long-term commitment, a lot of loyalty built in because they hopefully will stick around for a long time if you're able to create a culture, and if you have the income, of course, to support it, then they're going to be your longtime loyal members that you're going to watch progress, that you'll promote. Even if it's your family and friends, you'll watch that confidence build and as they start to excel at their roles. You've got greater control and integration with employees because with employees, unlike contractors, you can control their working hours and their tasks, and you can give them performance evaluations. Contractors, you can do same. It's a different word that you use, even though it's the same thing, but you don't give a contractor an employee performance review. Um, what else? Opportunities for skill development and growth because employees are constantly learning. Being an employee is another way of thinking of that is getting paid to learn. And you as an employer are solely responsible for ensuring that your employees are progressing and that their skills are growing and that they are progressively given more and more trust and more stake. For contractors, so as we've hit on, they're a lot more flexible, cost effective because a contractor is someone you bring in that is usually has qualifications already, and they're cost effective just because you're paying them by project basis when you need them. It's not as much loyalty because a contractor has to legally be able to take other contracts because if they can't, then that would make them an employee. And you can save on some of those costs associated with hiring employees like payroll taxes, benefits, training, and you can access their specialized skills and expertise, like I said, because they usually come with some qualifications, or when you're hiring contractors, that's what you're looking for. But same thing with employees, really, you just want someone who is reliable, that has the skill set, that has potential that you can invest in. And then reduce administrative responsibilities just because contractors have to do their own taxes. So they'll do taxes on their personal taxes. So that reduces some of the paperwork for you, and you only collect a W-9. So I've got a little video on here too, just to give anyone who is new to Indeed a little bit of a tutorial. Um, Kingstream has pretty much exclusively been on Indeed since the Facebook thing, which was great. But I was paying for that. On Indeed, I don't pay, and it gets a lot more exposure anyway. If you want to pay, you can sponsor a job posting. That'll give you more visibility. It'll be a lot faster. But if you're not in a dire rush, which I guess it depends on the role also and what you're able to pay, but I've seen a lot of applications. You're not going to get the most qualified people at minimum wage, and this is why people hire their family and their friends. But that's okay because everyone has to start somewhere. Indeed also allows you to schedule interviews, leave notes on the candidates, message them, and track. So it's a lot more organized because you can leave notes on each person and kind of move them through your process at your pace. Washington is an at-will employment state. Does that mean I can fire people without reason? This is a pretty common question, so I included it in here. Employers can terminate a worker. No, whoops. It can terminate a worker without notice or warning. Crazy enough, but you cannot violate their employee protection laws. And what those laws are, there are a few, and we'll touch on some of the bigger ones, the most common ones that you'll hear about or have dealt with probably at some point in your life. But just because we are an at-will state does not mean you get off scot-free. Actually, most of the lawsuits that I've seen, even some of my clients facing, are because of wrongful termination cases or discrimination cases. Those are pretty easy to prove. The employee handbook, this is also going to make your job a lot easier. as far as mitigating risks and costs. So the employee handbook is basically your Bible as far as company culture and the instructions and some of the term. It outlines the specific terms, the responsibilities, and then protects you as well as an employer, but it also protects the rights of your employees. And your employees, especially the type A folks, will diligently read the employee handbook and probably understand it better than you because they they want to understand the rules, but also if your employee handbook needs to be strengthened, they will find it. Where to write an employee handbook, because this can be hard, especially if you're just getting started, if you've never worked in HR, of course. Indeed has a comprehensive guide on how to write an employee handbook. It gives really like easy, digestible tips so you can get started there, but also they have free templates. You can download them and then put them in like Word or something and edit it. Workable, another workable plug. They also have I want to say theirs is AI as far as their employee handbook, so you can make it pretty fast, like usually same day. And these handbooks will be, 20, 30, 40 pages. Rocket Lawyer, that's what I used in the beginning to get my employee handbook because excuse me, because it's free. So you can download their employee handbook for free and then put it in something like Word, change some of the words around, the titles, the pay, specific terms. With all of these things, I am not an attorney, but Rocket Lawyer does have attorneys as a part of their paid service. So if you pay, and their subscription that I've had for like 4 years is like $19. So you can pay a lawyer to look at your employee handbook to make sure that things are on the up and up.
I agree with the Rocket Lawyer, also legal Zoom, but I would suggest either the paid version or hire a lawyer for an hour or two after you have the template to look at it, or hire someone in HR. SIMBA provides those services for free. Kingstring provides those services for a small cost. But starting with those templates, a lot of attorneys will tell you not to because it's not putting money in their pocket. But having a good space and just having someone look at it and make updates is a good use of your money, but having that starting point is a great way to be. So I agree with Rocket Lawyer, and also Legal Zoom does a great job.
Yes. Okay. And we'll touch on some of the laws of the land. Did you want to say anything or no? Okay. And these are at least the five most common that I've seen from my clients, and then also headlines that I've seen in the news from large companies. You've got wage and hour laws, so regardless of whether they're your family or people that you're hiring in that are new to the company, this is the number one way that I've seen a lot of employers get in trouble with wage and hour laws. The big one is breaks, making sure that your employees are taking breaks. It varies from place to place, but a good rule of thumb is every 2 hours they should get a 10-minute break, regardless of what the job is. And if they're working a 5-hour shift, they should get a 30-minute break, an unpaid lunch. And then if you were to double that, let's say they're working 10 hours, the same calculation applies. Discrimination and harassment laws, that's another big one. This is why you want to know what is inside of your employee handbook to make sure that none of the protected classes are ever a part of your decision making. And that includes things like national origin. One that I don't see on here that's a good one is family status, so like someone who is pregnant, age. So even with young people, you don't want to get in trouble with one of your own kids or one of your family members on an age discrimination. Religion is another big one, being mindful and respectful and accommodating for other people's religions, even if you don't share them. Leave requirements is another big one, especially in Washington State. You must provide eligible employees with required leave. So that's paid sick leave and family or medical leave, so FMLA. The best place to find that is going to be on their website, the FMLA website. your role as an employer is just to make sure that you are honoring those times. Really, just try to be as accommodating as possible. You want to create a culture where people feel like they can ask for leave and vacation, especially even if it's just personal wellness. If you can kind of see them approaching burnout, accommodate to the best of your ability so that no one has to, you don't want to breed um, lies for people to take off the time that they need, especially if it's to take care of their families. Safety and health regulations. This is more common in warehouse spaces, manufacturing plants, environments where there's a lot of heavy equipment and machinery. You can even reach out to whoever your local OSHA or LNI is to come and do safety walks free of charge. They'll audit and they'll give you a report of what they've noticed. And then you've got workers' comp insurance, which is another responsibility of the employer. For all of these, or at least with workers' comp and wage and hour laws and those HR management softwares, they will allow you to input these things because they know that you have to keep track of them. So they'll even make sure that your employees are taking breaks. And if they're not clocking out for breaks, it'll ding them so that you can see that, because even if they're not taking breaks and it looks like you know and you're not doing anything, you can still be held legally responsible. I've seen a lot of that.
I think along those lines, a couple of things that are important that you've already touched on, but to reinforce them even more, SIMBA is now an L&I contractor to help with some of these very specific issues. And some things that I have found interesting that we have learned is that regardless of what your job is, even if it's you sitting in an office by yourself in a computer, Washington law requires you to have a workplace safety plan. There are free ones on the L&I website, but you have to have one, and it has to be printed and available and like physically printed, which is wild. And wage and hour laws, we keep talking about hiring your family. You have to pay your family. You cannot pay them in the joy of working for you or sweat equity. You have to pay them at least minimum wage, regardless of their relationship to you. There's all kinds of times, as we all know, when family relationships go bad, and I have seen some litigation around that. So
Yeah,
all of these are very serious, even if it's your family or a close friend.
absolutely. And I'll kind of breeze through this. I always try to include at least one case study. This one, and I title all my case studies. This one's Kitchen Chaos. So this was a multi-unit food restaurant and bar in a city. So I'll kind of give some of the details, and then we can start to put our employer hats on and think about ways that they could have prevented maybe some of what ended up being almost a mass exodus of their workforce. So they held mandatory monthly all-team meetings on Sundays between 10 and 12. Most of their staff, that's when they observe their religious faiths. So as you would imagine, many of the team didn't come, and when they did come, they were very disgruntled, and no one really wanted to talk. So the staff meetings were almost entirely ran and spoken by the owner and the operations manager, and really no one else, because that was the environment. Was a very do as I do, or do as I say, not even as I do. There was an 8-page agenda that was covered. It's really good to approach staff meetings, and even if it's just your family, even if it's only 3 people, have staff meetings and have them at least once a month just to check in and see how everyone is doing. It's really important, and you can catch a lot of strife and conflict sometimes at the lowest level. So they were doing the staff meetings, which is great. When you're doing these staff meetings, remember that your staff is the star. You're hosting the space for them. For you, it's more of a checkup. You're facilitating. There was an 8-page agenda, which was done by the operations manager, that was full of technical jargon and icebreakers. This is where you want to make sure as an employer you are communicating in terms that your staff will understand. So veer away from technical jargon. And then also on that agenda, there was a breakdown of the staff's performance. So everyone got to see who were the lowest, I guess the lowest contributors in their words, which was not, it's not a good idea to show people obviously publicly, because that singles those individuals out. And then they proceeded to ask all of the lowest performers to kind of defend themselves, almost like it turned into a public court. That was really uncomfortable, and I could see that everyone kind of wanted to leave after that. So your problems as the employer are not your employees' problems. There was a space in the meeting where the owner talked about all the costs that were racking up. He went through the cost of each napkin, as well as the cost of the toilet paper, and how much that was running him. There was a lot of I's. You want to use we and they and us and our. And then the owner continuously interrupted the managers. Why? Because they were his friends and his sister. But that also teaches your staff, if they're not related to you, that they can also talk to the managers in that way. This is why we want to uphold professional boundaries when we're clocked in. They had another HR manager who was a contractor, was trusted with all the personnel files. The personnel files were at home with that HR manager. That HR manager stopped returning the calls of the owner after about a year. He made away with like $100,000 worth of payroll taxes and just disappeared. So that's how that ended. This is why you want to monitor where money is going, especially with personnel files. And because we could not retrieve the personnel files, we had to let all the employees know that their files were compromised because we could not find this person. Because the owner was able to explain all of this, they were able to avoid the fines for all of the fines that would have been associated with something like this. But as a result of this and a flurry of other things, they lost half their staff. And maybe the 6 weeks that I had been a part of the team. So our key takeaways from this, just to put them all together, don't allow staff to remove or retain sensitive personnel documents, even if it's family. If you have a physical space, keep it in the space, keep it locked up. If you don't have a physical space, then still keep it somewhere where you know where they are and it's secure. Do not promote family members unless they're trained and qualified. That's a really big one. The manager that was the owner's sister was the least qualified person in the restaurant, and all of the staff knew that. So that made it harder for them to respect her, which means the other manager had to cover down. So that created inefficiency. Treat people with respect, golden rule. Don't fire employees until you provide additional training to improve their employees. As we've talked about, that means that it's your responsibility to train them. They're a reflection of your ability to train and hire and your investment in them. So never just quickly write off employees if they're not performing to your standard, especially if you haven't communicated it effectively. So a lot of people were also fired without any notice or without a series of corrective actions. So you want to keep track of all the dialogue you have with your employees in terms of corrective action, training, infractions, even with your family. You want to keep track. You never want to have to use any of this stuff, but it's just in case. You got to protect the business. And don't single out staff members. It's pretty obvious. Learn your employee handbook and continuously strive to improve it. So their employee handbook was maybe 2 years older than the staff. So because of that, there were a lot of things that just weren't covered as far as their policies. Employee handbooks are where you write out your policies as well as your terms. And then also, just a last takeaway, your employees are not doing you a favor. More so, it's the other way around. They're coming in on your dream to help you build out your business, and then in exchange for their time, you're paying them so that they can spend that money on their dreams. But that's the relationship. And when you are interacting with your staff, you want to make sure that that is how they feel, that you're all a part of the same thing and that they are helping you, not that they should be so lucky just to be hired by you. Okay, we covered this, so we don't really have to go here again, because these are the most common employer fines. These are the top three by small and large companies across the country. with wage and hour laws, which we kind of talked about, tax violations, which we saw in the case study with the HR manager. Excuse me. And then health and safety violations is another big one. Sometimes you'll get random audits from the health department or from OSHA or employees at any time. If they feel they are unsafe, they can report you. They can report you to L&I. They can start a claims there. There's also the EEOC for discrimination, but there's rights that protect employees across the country. But even in your small business, if it's just you and your friends, they still have rights as employees. Another, a last part with that case study. Another area that could have been improved was they are in a food place. This is why you want to know the uniforms as well as what your employees need to be safe in your working environment, and that is non-slip shoes if you're in like a restaurant, let's say. So they let someone work without non-slip shoes. On the second day, she slipped and then sued the company. So wrongful termination. This is, I guess, not an example of that. Wrongful termination is when an employee is fired unfairly or illegally by violating the terms of their employment contract or state and federal laws. Examples include discriminatory cases or harassment cases. It's another common one. And then retaliatory termination. So that's you retaliating based off of your employee advocating or speaking to their rights as an employee. Misclassification. This is another big one, more so with contractors. So misclassifying interns, apprentices, or contractors if you have them with contractors, exclusively working for you, or interns as unpaid. This is why you outline all these terms within your job description. And also you want to know what the specific limitations are for contractors and for employees so that you don't get in trouble for misclassification. Just in that contractors have more flexibility and employees have more responsibility on you, but they stay for longer. Uber and Lyft are some of the most common companies, are the biggest gig economy companies that I see in trouble for this the most often, misclassification, because they work so many hours that in California, for instance, they are viewed as employees. So what larger companies sometimes do in an exploitative fashion, they will bring them on as contractors because it's cost effective, instead of making them employees where they have to give them benefits to save costs for them, but then those contractors can't work anywhere else, so they very quickly work as employees. Hiring minors, we just go through the steps. In Washington State, if you want to hire a minor, I want to say the minimum age is, I think it's 14. It might be on one of these slides. And then for agricultural workers, it's as young as 10. If it is a family farm, and if you get assigned approval from Superior Court, I want to say. But otherwise, rule of thumb is 16. You'll get a minor work permit endorsement on your business license. So you'll go to the Department of Revenue, and you'll go through their system and get and add the endorsement for the minor work permit. It's under $100, maybe $20, $30 to get that added on there. And then you'll have to reprint or be sent your business license so that you can officially hire minors. And then you'll get a completed parent/school or summer authorization form. So that's like their permission slip for being minors, because school is still their first responsibility. Verify the minor's age, of course, and keep copy of their records. The paperwork is very similar outside of the school authorization form. And then for non-agricultural jobs, this is how they split minors in Washington State. Those are the acceptable documents that you'll also keep in your personnel files. And then for agricultural jobs, those are under there. What we learned. In conclusion, hiring is not just a transaction, it is an opportunity to shape the future of your organization. By aligning your hiring needs with your business goals and values, you can build a team that not only meets your current needs, but also drives long-term growth and success. By following these guidelines and understanding the liabilities associated with hiring, organizations can navigate the hiring process successfully and secure the talent they need to drive growth and achieve their objectives. These next two slides are just resources for you after you view this presentation or download it. All these links go to different places. So you've got, of course, SIMBA, City of Spokane, Startup Washington, SCORE, but these are really good resources for free or low cost that you can use so that you don't feel like you have to bear the full weight of being an employer, especially if you're new. This is the numbers and the websites to L&I. You want to maintain a good relationship with L&I to avoid any fines there. And then they've got some in-language translation as well. Questions? There we go.
A couple of questions for our recording. You mentioned, and we talked a lot about, especially small business owners are hiring family, they're hiring friends. And in your case study, you mentioned there was kind of boundaries crossed and invasive questions and just really inappropriate things. How do you set those professional boundaries when you're working with like your best friend or your sister or someone like that? Any tips on how to keep the workplace professional but still maintain that relationship?
Yeah. The number one tip is communication. Communicating, being very transparent, but also really when you step into the work environment, just abandon some of the familiarity so that you can adopt a more professional tone because you are an employer and there is a power dynamic there that you want to make sure that you're being fair to your staff, also to yourself, but you want to make sure you're being fair. It is a lot harder to salvage those relationships after something goes wrong, and something always goes wrong, or I wouldn't have a job, than it is to start communicating effectively, onboarding the right way, and then continuously training and providing opportunities for your family and friends to voice how they're feeling. Because let's say the company continues to grow and maybe it's not just your family and friends anymore, that feedback is going to help you bring in even more top talent.
And you also mentioned a lot about wage and hour law. Any tips for employers? I think there's a lot of rhetoric now about nobody wants to work. Tips for employers for setting wages in ways that people do want to work, in addition to some of those tools where I think you made a good point that the employee is doing you a favor. You're not doing them a favor by giving them a job. So ideas on setting those wages and setting those standards so people do want to work for you.
Absolutely. Well, first, the best way to go about as far as wages is setting a range. That's all I've ever done, and that's worked perfectly fine because it allows people to also advocate for themselves. The more conversation and feedback you get, the better, especially if it is someone you already know and trust. But that is the best way to make sure that the wages are something that are agreed to by everyone, is having that conversation. Just give them the range, pick wherever you feel like they're worth based off of their resume and having nothing to do with a personal relationship, based off of resume alone, and then that makes it fair. How you want to come across in all interactions, family or not, is fair. You want to be a fair employer. People respect fair.
And one last question. What can King's Dream do for my business? And how do I go about, besides this last slide, of getting online? What is the process like, and what kind of services can you provide for my business?
That's an excellent question. For starters, we are on social media, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn at Kingstream Consulting, pretty easy to find. Then, of course, our website, and Kingstream works with small business owners across the country on really setting the foundation. But when we come in, we're looking to increase your capacity, increase your income, and help you save on costs or liabilities. HR is one of the biggest liabilities a business will face because it's so important to the business that people are managed effectively. So we can support you in your HR efforts as well as some of the other sources that are listed there. But Kingstream will work with you with wherever your small business is at and help you come up with a plan.
Well, on behalf of SIMBA, I want to thank you for coming out to Spokane
Thank you.
and offering this presentation. As we mentioned, our friends at Vaccine Media, maybe I didn't mention their name before, are recording this. We will share it when it's ready. Apologies for the city of Spokane showing up proud and blowing a fire alarm in the middle of our presentation. That will be cut out on the video, but we should probably leave this audio in. So for those of you who came online or who were in person and had to leave, we will happily share the slides, share the media. And we are always looking for feedback at SIMBA about topics you want to see, presentations you want to have, speakers you would like us to bring in, or topics you want us to cover, and times and locations that work best for you. It's always hard without the feedback to know when is the best time to get our business owners for different kinds of events. We thank everyone for being here. Again, we thank Joanne, we thank our staff at Vaccine Media, and the Spokane Library that has incredible spaces that are available for everyone for free with just a library card. So I'm going to plug the library. And we hope to see you soon. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's a great sign off.